Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Dan Older, who works as a professional portation provider for people with non medical needs. In this capacity, he ushers people to and from their appointments with compassion and grace. In his downtime, he's part of a hot air balloon crew and enjoys the unique hobby of ghost hunting with his wife and friends. In 2019, Dan's life changed when his only brother, Brad, died from a massive heart attack. Dan immediately started writing poetry to help process his thoughts and joined a support community that helped him see he wasn't alone. 5 years into this healing journey, he now leads a Write Your Soul meeting that encourages others to express themselves through writing. In addition to leading the group, he speaks at grief-centered conferences and shares his poetry to help those who are hurting from a loss. Dan lives in Michigan with his wife Star and their fur baby Ash, who is nearby.
Very nearby.
Thank you so much for being here and making time with your
Absolutely.
busyness.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
This is pretty special and so much to talk about, but why don't you tell everyone a little bit about why you're here, why you're getting out more and sharing your story kind of bolder with every day.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of this stemmed from my decision last year to go to a live conference. I've been waiting. We're waiting for that right time. You know what I mean? You're waiting for the right time. Am I ready? Am I mature enough? Am I ready to experience all of that? And I also said, well, with my first conference, I'm also going to speak at my first conference. So there were a number of things that kind of encouraged me. As a writer, I'm always trying to find things that inspire me, and I chose my word as conquer this year. So in January, I said, okay.
Uh-oh. We might have lost you. We're just going to be patient. And while I wait for Dan to pop out,
There we go.
in January. We lost you.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, I've lost you. I don't have audio anymore.
Keep fiddling, or maybe.
Okay, we good now?
Good now?
Okay.
Okay.
Unfortunately, for some reason, I don't have any audio anymore from you.
Do you want to leave and come back? That's what maybe he heard, maybe he didn't. If you are here, I will tell you a little bit more about Dan. Our book, Faces of Grief, which is coming out in December, is more than just a book. It is a movement, but it is a community. These authors, we've become such a family. So one of the authors who's been on this show, Jason, connected Dan to the book and his journey with us in a short time. He's had so much impact, and I can see how much he puts into everything he does. So I'm excited that he's back and can maybe hear me this time.
Yes, I got
Yes.
you good. Love technology some days.
I was just telling everyone how we connected and
Yeah.
in a short time, how much of an impact you're already making, not just in this book, but just every day I see you doing big things.
Well, yeah, and again, I think as I was saying before, it was making a conscious decision that I'm ready. Year 5, we just passed year 5. Year 5 was my breaking point. Year 5 was that point where I said, I'm done being afraid. I'm done being scared of everything that's holding me back. So I knew I had to choose my word as conquer, because I knew I had to start conquering things to be able to do what I wanted to do and to be able to make the difference that I wanted to make. Um, and that's exactly what I needed to do. The word conquer has taken me to places I never thought I would go, never thought I would do. But I also knew I needed that reminder, walking into, a live conference. Brad had lived there for 4 years. My brother's name was Brad. He lived there for 4 years in St. Louis. So I'm not only walking into a conference for the first time, I'm giving a talk for the first time. I'm also walking into a city for the first time where he lived. So there's all these emotions wrapping around you, and I know a lot of people through Zooms, but when we meet in person, it's completely different. I can hide behind a camera. I can't necessarily hide when I'm in front of you, and the emotions start running. Um, and so, again, I needed to choose that word conquer to say, you've got this. It may be hard, it may be challenging, it may be difficult, but you've got this. And that was my motivation. And in May, um, I had joined Grief Hab very shortly because I know you mentioned Jason. I was following him. I showed up to kind of help him and kind of support him, and I was excited about it. He'd shared a couple things with me, so I wanted to be there for him. Jason was there for me a lot, in the beginning of my journey. So it was my way to give back. And it was interesting because the day that I reached out to you, 45 minutes before that, my neighbor and I were having a conversation in the driveway about taking opportunities when the door opened. You know, and I saw that on Facebook, and it was kind of like, well, do I believe what I just said, or do I not believe that? And the door opened up, and again, choosing that word conquer, get over yourself, you know, stop thinking that you don't have something to give people.
Well, let's talk because I would say that yes, you are crazy conquering, but I think that the grief journey it took a lot of conquering to get to 5 years that the
It did.
world doesn't see. Or so let's talk about those people who think, oh my God, I would never be ready. You did some things that helped you get there. So how do you know Jason? How did you guys connect?
So yes, Jason, and I can't say enough about him. I've written him a couple of poems. Um, but I joined a group called the Compassionate Friends, and it was specifically for siblings, and that's what I needed. But before that, I was writing already. I was already processing what I was going through my writing, you know, and I had joined the page, but I didn't really engage, and I think that's a part of the journey is understanding that we can join whatever we want, but until we engage with it, it's not going to make a difference. You know, reading posts are great, but getting involved makes it real. And I think that's the hard part about grief is if we start to process it, it becomes real. And when it becomes real, it becomes emotional. And I myself was afraid of those emotions because there was emotions that I was feeling that I didn't like. And I think that's the key is conquering that, understanding that it is completely okay to feel whatever you're feeling, even if it's really, really dark. I had to learn to process the really, really dark, and I remember early on in my writings, I never wanted to end a piece in darkness. I never wanted to go down this bad path. And I remember, I think it was the first Christmas, and I was struggling. I had a nightmare, and I wrote about the nightmare, and it ended not so well. And I shared it with my support group, and they said, "You know what, Dan? That's probably the best piece you ever wrote." And I was angry. I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "This is terrible." They said, "This is not who I am. This is not what I do. This is not what I talk about." And they told me, and they said, "Look, what happened to you wasn't good. What happened to you was dark and scary. So for you to sit here and say that it's not, is not dealing with what you need to deal with." So it struck a chord in me and realized that I could start to process every piece. And I didn't have to be worried about judgment. And I still do. Let's be honest. We still do. On those hard days, we don't want to admit that we're struggling that bad. But that was one of the big pieces that really started to allow me to say, you know what, I can move forward, I can succeed in this. And with that, I was able to finally go to my first meeting. And it wasn't Jason, it was actually another Zoom, but it got me involved into the writing group. It got me engaged. It got me thinking. It got me processing. And that was what I needed. I needed to get involved. I said it, I think I said it in one of my recent pieces. You know, fear, fear is fear, but when we step into fear, it becomes less. Because fear is just perceived notions of what we think might happen. But when we actually step into fear, we kind of realize that maybe it's not too bad. And then also understanding there's a formula, and I just created this formula the other day. Understanding grief, because grief done by itself creates mistrust. Because we start mistrusting ourselves, we start struggling with um, self doubt, we start struggling with self confidence, we start struggling with all these things because grief is saying you're stuck now. There's nothing left good for you. This is where you're going to stay. And you have to try and process that. But if you take the grief and you take the person and you connect it with another person in grief, now becomes this beautiful package of trust. And you could be completely strangers. But grief and that person bring those two people together, and in an instant you can trust one another. And it was mind-boggling as I was thinking about that the other day, how quick and how fast that truly happens. And I saw it over and over and over again at the conference. People I didn't know, but we had a shared interest. That's a bad word. We had a shared experience in grief, and because of that we were able to trust each other and have meaningful, deep conversations, even though we've known each other for seconds or maybe minutes at a time. So um but again, that's kind of my history. I joined in, I got involved, I started writing. And last year Jason approached me and said, "Hey, would you mind restarting the writing group?" I was terrified. I was like, "What do you mean? Like me? Like, do you know who you're talking about? Do you know who you're talking to?" But that's what's great about Jason, and that's what I suggest with anybody struggling with what's the next step. Get somebody that will be accountable to you. Get somebody you can be accountable for. You know, as you know, I've heard before. Everyone needs a Paul and everyone needs a Barnabas. We need to be taught and we need to teach, but we need to have both to be really effective. Jason is my Paul. Jason teaches me. Jason, shows me the rope. I asked Jason in the beginning of my journey, "Can I hide behind you?" I didn't want to ask those questions, especially as a guy. Especially as a guy, these are really emotional questions. I don't want to be known as the guy asking that question. Like, it was that self doubt. I didn't have confidence in dealing with the situation that I was in. And he said yes, but only for a time being.
Right.
He pushed me. And that's what we need to be able to start processing this grief. It doesn't go away. But when we process it together as a group, it becomes easier, and you can step out of the role of being that Barnabas and you can start teaching others.
And grief unites us, period, right? We
100%.
connected instantly the moment we met, we were bonded. But I need my widow groups and you
Yeah,
need your sibling groups. We need the
100%.
people who get it in that way. So
Hmm.
just a day or two ago, I posted all of Grief Hab's groups.
Yeah,
And somebody said, I'd love to see you add a sibling group. And I
yeah.
said, I intentionally am not adding a siblings group because
Hmm.
there's no one anywhere should go other than to Jason's sibling group.
Yeah,
We connect and we refer to each other and we understand that we can all heal together, but we also have certain branches that need separate time. So any
100%.
sibling, please connect with Dan or Jason or me to get you there.
Yeah.
I would be doing a disservice having anybody else do a group. I would send anyone there the connections. Again, even those of you who are not ready to jump in, get involved, conquer,
Hmm.
you can observe until
Hmm.
you get there, until you
Yeah,
get to the point that you want to ask a question, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah, and that's what was beautiful about it. He he saw where I was, he met me where I was, but then didn't let me stay there. And that's the key to this journey. We can't stay in our current situation and expect to heal. I've heard it said before, and I had a mentor that used to say it all the time. If you buy a bicycle bike and you don't use it and you don't lose weight, not the bike's fault. It's the same thing here. If we don't take advantage of the resources we have and we're not healing, it's not the resources' fault. And again, that was where I had to get to. I had to understand, look, if you want to heal, you've got to make the motion. You've got to start pedaling that bike, because if not, you're going to stay stuck and we're going to just waste our energy.
It's interesting connecting with you now, not at that early point, right? Because I didn't see the deepest broken grief, right? So
Yeah,
to
yeah,
hear you say you were afraid of the emotions is not the person I know.
yeah.
Right? Like you've embraced them, you understand you have to feel them. But you're very, very open, which is hard in this world, period. But for men, again, like it is such a gift to know there are people willing to put it out there so that someone else knows they can too.
Yeah, 100%. I show up, to Zooms, and there's maybe me and one other guy. You know what I mean? Like it's it is what it is. But I made my choice. I made my choice that I wasn't going to allow this to control me. And if that means that, I'm the only guy, so what? You know, Guys have feelings too. Guys struggle too, and until that until that reaches here, nothing's going to change, but as a writer, I've learned I can't think it all. It's got to come from my heart. As a writer, I have to understand I can't think my poetry into existence. My existence comes from the heart. My passion comes from my heart. I never saw this happening 5 years ago. But again, I was thinking too much. You know,
And
Today
I don't
I
think
had,
any of us see, right? Like
yeah,
early, none of us know where it's going.
yeah. Today, I allowed myself to feel everything that I was feeling because I knew getting on here, if I was put my wall up, I'm no good. You know what I mean? So it's honestly been a very challenging day for me because I've allowed all those emotions to come through and process, But I understand I'm not at my best if I'm thinking. I'm at my best when I'm allowing this to speak.
So you said poetry. I was going to go there, that people see a book, hear that
Yeah,
there will be stories, and they're
yeah,
probably expecting a handful of stories.
right.
Without giving anything, too much away, you
Yeah,
are unique in this journey, writing poems. So
very.
and embraced it. It never bothered you at all. But that's also a little culture of its own that
Hmm.
doesn't have as much room in this world, I think. So
Yeah.
please, there are people who people think I have to be good at writing. I have to have had this class,
Hmm.
right? Did you do any of that?
No. So I remember, I remember, and I've thought about it over the last couple of years, but um, I was in eighth grade and we were working on poetry. And one of our teachers challenged us and said, I'm going to give you a picture. I want you to write about that picture and I'm going to guess your picture. I said, challenge on. I liked a good poetry challenge. Like I embraced it early on. Um, and so I wrote this beautiful piece and I read it and she's flipping through the pictures, couldn't find it. And she goes, okay, now I'm confused. And so I showed her the picture and she goes, that can't be. It was a 50,000 foot view and I described everything that I saw. And I read it again and she goes, you got some talent there. you know? So I always knew that I had it, but I didn't have the vehicle to pursue it. We all have talents, we all have gifts. And if we don't have the vehicle, it's really not going to matter. It's just going to kind of sit there in that gift box and grow dust, And for many, many, many years, it grew dust. But when challenges started to arise, I realized that was my outlet. I understood 4 line stanzas. That's all I understood about poetry. I didn't understand the mechanic. I didn't care. I knew I could write 4 lines and call it a poem. And that is how I started journaling. And we had some things go on with my wife. And I used journaling, uh, poetry to process that. And so I was working through everything, and then just a matter of months later, we get this phone call, your brother's gone. Um, and immediately I said, all right, well, I need to write a poem. You know, I need to read, I need to do a eulogy. I need to do this, So I looked up definitions of what a brother was. I looked up a couple songs. I wrote him a poem, and that was my eulogy, you know. But it was me transferring a feeling from in here onto paper, and that's all poetry is, transferring that feeling. But again, it can't come from up here. It's got to come right from here. It's got to come from the heart, because if you're thinking it, nobody's gonna feel it.
Now, there are some people who might never want to share their work, and that's
Hundred
fine. And there
percent.
are some people I need to point out because I was finger painting at 3 in the
Yeah.
morning when I couldn't sleep,
Yeah.
and I loved it. It got my mind off of my mind, right? And
Hmm.
it got me through the sleepless night. However, it's not my best talent. I'm a writer as well. So
Yeah.
even my nieces are like, "Oh, Aunt Sam, we can't show anyone these," right? It's
Right.
not
Right.
about the outcome. It's about
Hmm.
processing the feelings and the release. And so anyone who's thinking they're not good enough, right? Like
Hmm.
it's so worth it. And one of our authors, Sean Deneen of Heartstring Journals, creates journals in 100 different ways because everyone writes differently.
Mm-hmm.
So please don't think you have to have a teacher who told you at 8 that you were great. Writing, if it feels like you can get it out on paper,
Mm-hmm.
no one's grading it.
Well, I think, I had to come to that realization too. I realized that these feelings aren't going away. I realized that what I was experiencing wasn't going to just magically vanish, and I didn't understand it, and I think, when we all start this journey, we don't understand all the things that are happening to us. We're confused, we're lost, we're crying, we're sad, we're angry, we're frustrated, you know, and there's all these feelings that are wrapped up. And if you haven't experienced all those, it just becomes a ball of mush that you can't untie. It becomes, an artwork of a cat. The yarn is every, 3,000 different ways, and you're trying to make sense of it, and you can't. You have to start snipping away at it, and that's what I had to do. I had to start snipping away at it, and there's honestly a lot of pieces that I haven't shared. A lot of the stuff that have been extremely deep, extremely scary. There's maybe a handful of people that have seen all of my work. But again, it comes back to that trust, and if I can encourage anybody that wants to be a supporter for someone that is looking to do poetry, looking to do writing, be 100% there and be 100% aware. They're gonna know if you're fake. They're gonna feel those feelings because they're already in tune with their emotions. They know what's going on. So they're gonna feel that too. And if you're transferring that over to them, they're not gonna
Not
have that
again.
trust that you want them to have.
Talk about the balloons, because this is something else that you don't just do. You've connected it to healing, right? People might just think it's another job or another avenue for something, but you bring it all back to this.
Yeah, I think my journey with ballooning started, I believe, 11 years ago. Might be a year off or two. Um, but it was for us, for my wife and I, we were photographers. And so had an opportunity to chase a balloon down. And we started taking pictures. Um, Went down to Indiana to chase the balloon that we work on, which is the sugar bear balloon. And as they say, the journey starts from there. We found out that the pilot lived in Battle Creek, which is where we live in Michigan. Um, and we just kind of started stalking him. Like, oh, look, here's we found out when he was flying, and, we would meet him at his landing spot normally because it looked like a really good spot to take a picture. And it was quite comical because he was slightly a little bit concerned because we would continue to show up and he had no idea really who we were. And so we actually became known as the stalkers. Uh, so, and within a couple of months, my wife really started to enjoy the sport as it was. She got more involved with the hands-on of the balloon, setting it up, tearing it down. She loves the fire, and it was our thing to do together. And as the years moved on and as we got more involved, we kind of, I kind of vacated out of the um, picture side of it, and I gotten really involved into the setup, the pack up, and the catching, and feeling like Superman as you're pulling this, balloon out of the air, and doing all these tough guy uh, things that the balloons can offer you. Um, So, fast forward 5 years ago, I was at an event in Frankenmuth, Michigan, when I got the call that Brad was gone. So, I had built this relationship with all these people for all these years. And that day, I realized that we did matter. Because that day the family came around us and they prayed over us. They took care of us. They checked in on us. Um, and I actually got to fly the morning that I found out that he was gone. So he had passed away the night before. Um, but I got the phone call. I got the message from Dad at like 3:30 in the morning when we got up to get ready for our last day of festivities. And I remember sitting in the room, and I remember Star putting her arm around me, and she goes, I think we should. And before she finished, I got up. I said, I got to get dressed. I said, we got a flight to do. And I think her jaw kind of dropped off the floor there. But for me, it was business as usual. My mind was blocking what actually happened. I had a job to do. I knew why I was there. I had to get it done. You know, and we got set up for the flight, and I asked if I could go, and he said, my pilot said yes. And so I had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to say goodbye 2,000 feet up. And it's something I will never forget. An opportunity to be close to him, to feel him, to have that one-on-one private conversation. Um, and so ballooning to me has changed perspectives a little bit.
We may have lost him again, folks. If we didn't, I will stop. If we did, that just made me think of my dear friend Shalini, who co hosts my retreats, recently went parasailing and said she felt like she was with the angels and just talked about the feelings that you get and that type of a therapeutic activity from something we might not expect it to come from. So I've been fascinated with Dan's journey and the balloons.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I was just
Sorry
a
about
friend
that.
my friend just went parasailing. I don't know if you heard, and just said, "I felt like I was with the angels." It's an entirely different way to connect.
Yeah, it is. It gives you that. And it's the calming of being in the air and just effortlessly floating. And I've been on multiple flights. I was terrified the first time, and fell in love with it in about 8 seconds. You know what I mean? It was beautiful. It was right. It was everything that I needed, and it gave me the confidence, to be able to conquer that fear and have a chance to fly with Brad the morning of me finding out. You know what I mean? So, but again, it changes things. It changes my perspective. It's different for me. It's a little more emotional for me. It carries a little bit more of a heavier weight. For some people, it's extremely exciting, and it is for me. But I'm also processing so much when that happens because I'm realizing that this was this was something that happened, and I'll never forget. And I can't take back the fact that I got to be there when all this happened. You know what I mean? And we go back every year to that place, and it's hard. It's a process. But I go back because of the love of it. I go back because even though the emotions are strong, it doesn't matter. It's okay with me, even though I don't feel okay during some of the processing.
And what's important, I think, is that it's not an advertised way to cope with grief or heal, right? So that's one of the other things that's so beautiful about our book, is that each of us is, sharing a little bit of our journey, but mostly our healing, which is different for each
Mhm.
of us. And then there's all these resources and things that someone might not have thought of. And maybe somebody isn't thinking about picking up a pen, but maybe now they're going to look into a balloon ride or something that involves
Mhm.
flying, or it doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you. But just last week, I believe it was a mental health balloon, right?
Last night, yeah.
So it's just a different way to say, this might not work for me, and that's okay. What other things are there? So I
Mhm.
really have heard people talk about how therapeutic it is. We're going to have a balloon something one day, because I've never heard someone say they didn't feel connected in some
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. And you're exactly right, Sam. And I think, again, as I've grown, as I've matured, because this journey is about a maturity. It is, you know, in the very beginning, we're very infant stage. We're crying a lot. We can't make sense of anything. Um, and as we mature and as we grow and as we see what others have done for us, if you're in the right frame of mind, it pushes you to say, you know what, I need to help the next person. I don't always go to the meetings because I need help. But what if that one person needs to hear what I need to, needs to hear what I'm about to say? And I think that's the beauty of those meetings, is you never know what the topic is. It's grief, but we don't necessarily understand what's going to happen. Some meetings you're extremely connected, other meetings, maybe not. And that's okay. Keep going back. I don't know, I actually had someone that came up to me at the conference. Um, didn't know her. And she said, Dan, she goes, I've been trying to talk to you all weekend. She goes, but I need you to know that you changed my life. She goes, because you created this word that made a difference for me. And it was called groyful. 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 Which means groif, which is grief and joyful put together.
Yeah, they don't exist separately for us anymore.
Mm-mm. It's finding that balance. You know, had I not shown up at that meeting and not had the inspiration to say that and create that, that meeting would have never happened. You know, I never know what I'm going to write. I never know, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I wrote a piece this morning processing my feelings for today and, what I was going to work through. And I remember writing a piece a couple weeks back, and I was like, this makes no sense whatsoever. It was about a party balloon. Didn't make sense to me. I described it. I did it. I read it a couple of times. I was like, okay, I guess it's cool. Like, and I sent it to someone, and it happened to be their sibling's birthday. And that's the beauty of what I'm able to do. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense to me, but it's going to bug me enough that I know I got to write it. you know, and I've learned, if it's bugging you, write it down and see what comes of it. It may be a masterpiece one day.
How can people connect with you if they want to be in the groups or just talk about writing, or maybe they want to learn about balloons? Who knows?
Yep. Yep. So I do have a Facebook page. Dan Older is what it's under. I do have if you join the Compassionate Friends Sibs, um, there is an email list that will get you connected to all of the Zoom links. My Zoom link is on there as well. And we meet the first and third Monday of every month. We'll do a Zoom starting at 7, go to 8-ish, depending on how the conversation's going. And I do have email too. So, and that's Danny underscore older at yahoo.com.
We'll put that in the
So,
show notes.
couple, yep, yep. So, a couple different ways to connect. I would love to be able to connect with people. Doing it live in person, kind of, again, it gave me the confidence I needed. It gave me the opportunity to say, yeah, I can do this. Joining your book. I mean, I've never done a podcast before, and here I am a couple months later into this, and we're doing this. And I'm excited to go live in Detroit. In August. So there's so many different opportunities, so many great things that are coming from this, and it all stems from just making that one choice.
No,
And
I want to correct you because you have jumped in with both feet and done more than just, sometimes we can be a part of things, but that's different than really actively being involved. So I talked about the fact that some people are asking me um, if any of the authors would want to talk about that. You were the first to jump up and raise your hand and say, I will do anything to promote any of this. So I waited. Ironically, not ironically, I got the email this morning or last night. Oh no, happy Wednesday. We'd like to move forward with an interview with Dan Older. So I will be sending you this
fantastic,
information, right? When we put ourselves out
fantastic.
there, when we have a bigger thing to do and we're focusing on helping others and not ourselves, it shows, like you said, it's from the heart. We have a lot of authors. Everyone's amazing. And if I am able, I'll give everyone's names. But you jumped in like with a passion and said, me. And so, yes, I'm going to say you need to connect with him. So I want people to know that about you, to be excited about the poems. But I don't think it is just, I don't think it's the same with everyone. You really put your heart in everything I've seen you do.
I appreciate that. And again, it stems from Jason pushing me, giving me the support that I need. I'm gonna throw it out there too. My awesome support sister Anna. She asked me going into the conference. She goes, "What can I do?" And I, and it took me a couple days, to answer her honestly, because I was trying to process, what am I really feeling? What am I really afraid about? And I said my biggest fear is I need to know that I'm safe. If we don't feel safe, we're not going to write how we need to write. We're not going to jump in a hot air balloon. You know, we're not going to go to a conference. We're not going to talk in front of people. We're not going to get on a podcast and share our lives. We're not going to do any of this. And she painted me a little rock, and it says, "I am safe," or "You are safe." you know and again, that has changed me, that has given me the confidence that I need, and now I'm actually on a journey that this rock goes with me wherever, and I take a picture with this rock whenever the heart says yes, let's take a picture. I'm taking a picture with that rock, and I look to do a video for next year's conference so people can kind of see the different places that the rock has gone with me, and it helps people just define and see that just because it may not look safe doesn't mean it isn't safe, and safety is a matter of you, nobody else. And that's the point of me taking this rock to all these different places. I want people to know safety is anywhere you feel comfortable. And if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't matter. Do it anyways. Be there, be present. And this has also opened up my eyes to an opportunity to travel more, to see more things. Because guess what? I need to feel safe. And if I feel safe, I can do more of what I'm doing right now.
And I'm sure there might be someone who could ask you to do a podcast that you don't have a relationship with. Maybe it isn't comfortable to share your story there, right? We can still share our story with the world. It has to be where we feel safe. So finding your people, right? Thank goodness. I thought we were writing a book. We have created a family. Every single author has a community to
100%.
invite you into, and it's not going to end when we hand you a book. We are still
Right.
trying to help support, share these messages. So please follow Dan. How can they, we said Facebook, we said email. Are we forgetting anything else?
Yep. I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, and I think that was, my challenge walking into this. And again, it was that confidence thing. All I do is write. I don't have a fancy business. I don't have any of that. All I do is write. And that was honestly a big head thing that I had to get out of my way. I'm just a writer. All I do is write. I've got a beautiful family. I got unique hobbies. Um, but I'm just me. I'm nothing big. I'm nothing big deal. And obviously, my support group is amazing because they slapped me upside the head when I need to hear it because look, you are amazing. You are making a difference. You are out there doing things that need to be done that most people aren't willing to do. you know and so that's where I'm at. That's me. But again, that was a hard process. We talked about this and I had multiple conversations with myself. Why are you doing this? you know why you? You're a small town kid, not a lot to offer. And yet I go back and I'm reminded to go back to the conversation that you and I had when I called you and we did that kind of a interview, and I read that first piece to you. It's my work. I don't have to look like $1 million. My work speaks for itself, and it's trusting that my work is good enough to be able to do more with it now. And I've seen it for years on Facebook. So many people say you should write a book, you should be a part of a book, be a part of a book. It was timing. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't I wasn't where I needed to be. And
And
then
I
the
agree.
skies
You're
opened up.
amazing, all of those things. But I know there are people watching and listening who don't feel amazing and need to know you can be just a small town kid from wherever. And it's not
100%.
about, right? Like, so to everyone who thinks I'm just a, right? Your voice, somebody needs to hear your story. People are touched coming up to you saying,
100%.
I couldn't wait to meet you. And it's when we can look at it that way and realize that not about my fear. It's about the person who needs to read it. Please do not let that stop you. You don't have to let anybody read it, but you can connect with us.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Thank you so much for everything you do, for being a part of this. Can't wait to see you. It's like 10 days, 12 days, something. So you can see us
Yeah.
together again on August 25th. Connect with Dan, follow our book. Final thoughts.
Final thought. Um, Stop thinking. And I will always go back to that. Just stop thinking. Just follow your heart. Your heart won't lead you astray. It's going to protect you from danger, and it's going to allow you to do things you never thought possible. This I never thought possible. A book was an opportunity, um, but I never really saw it coming to fruition. An audiobook, obviously, as we're coming out with that now too. There's so many great opportunities that I can expand and grow from. And I guess my final thought, just remember that one thing. That one choice can turn your life completely in a different direction. I made a choice to use the word conquer, and I'm bounds and steps ahead in 8 months than I have been in the last 39 years. So choose your word, choose your option, choose your choice. Just choose one thing and hang on for the ride.
And that could be just connecting with Dan. Thank you so, so much. Thank you for being a part of
Thank
this
you. I appreciate
community,
that.
everyone. Until next time, always be ruthless.